Is my vote worthless? I'm considering not voting. Is this a privileged position?
Well, let's talk about privilege. But before we get into that, I've blacked out my address here, but I have my ballot. I haven't gone through it. I'm opening it here on the podcast. We'll get post-production. P3, he can hear this here, right? You get all the unwrapping of the ballots.
By the way, Josh, if I convince you to vote for the person I wanted to vote for, that's not consent.
Absolutely. Yeah. and so my wife has this t-shirt that says like coercion is not consent, but I would say that convincing is also not consent.
Yeah.
And so I've got my little virtue signal here. I'll throw this on. I voted today. Does that look good on me, Jordan?
They haven't changed that sticker in like 5 years.
All right. And so there's so many...
It's like the same one.
So many people. I can. So let me set this up, Ryan, because
you
and I had this conversation on the podcast, and some people got frustrated because I simply asked the question. I said, "Hey, I'm voting this coming weekend, but I'm just wondering, like, does it even make sense to vote? Does my..." And so, like, I'm glad Daniel's question came up here because it's very similar to a question I had before. And so I do plan on voting in this election, but what I will tell you, and maybe TK can even challenge me on this, is I will spend somewhere between 6 and 8 hours of my time.
It's miserable.
Researching.
Half of them don't even have a website.
And then I automatically like cross them out if you couldn't bother to have a website at this point.
Yeah.
But like it's so many people, and I have to, look, national election, the United States Senator, full term. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different people. Wait, oh, no, keeps going. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 people or write-in candidate, so 23 people that I have to research if I want to vote for any of these people, because I feel as though, well, if I vote blindly, which I've done in the past, did I waste my vote? But getting back to Daniel's question, so I have to do this for every single issue on here, and it's a huge, you can hear this if you're just listening here. It's a thick ballot. This page is intentionally left blank. Says that in writing, which is strange.
Don't we have that in our book? We stole it from the ballot.
Yeah, so I go through any one of these, and it's going to take me 6 to 8 hours.
So yeah.
And so what's the charitable response to Daniel when he says, is my vote worthless? I'm considering not voting. And also, is this a privileged position? TK.
Okay, so a few different elements here. Number one, is this a privileged position? I think that's irrelevant. Not irrelevant in the sense that I am going to dismiss your question and that your concern is important, but irrelevant in the sense that no matter how you come down on the privilege issue, it still doesn't answer the question or get to the heart of things. Case in point, hey, I have $10 million and I'm not sure how I want to spend it. Should I give it to charity? Should I buy a Ferrari? Should I buy a mansion? Is this a privilege problem, guys? Yes, it's definitely a privilege problem. Secondly, it tells you nothing whatsoever about what you need to do with that money.
Yeah.
You still have the question there. You have $10 million. Absolutely, that's a privilege problem that most people are never going to have, but it doesn't matter. Having a privilege problem doesn't mean that that's a problem, right? We are all privileged in different areas from one another. Privilege in this sense just means you have the luxury of possessing problems that stem from having advantages. And we live in a world that makes us feel as if we have to apologize for having our advantages. You don't have to apologize for having your advantages. In fact, apologizing for your advantages just wastes the valuable time you need to be spending on what am I going to do with these advantages? How am I going to express the advantages I have or use them in a way that's advantageous, in a way that's healthy, and so on. So if you got $10 million and you don't know how to spend it, yes, that's a privilege problem, but we still have the question. What do we want to do? What reflects your values? So that's the first part. Don't spend so much time worrying about if your problems are privileged or not. Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
Yeah.
Secondly, is my vote worthless? Neither your vote nor your non-vote is ever worthless, because everything that you do sends an economic signal into the marketplace. If you don't vote, that's actually an action that has impact. If you do vote, that's an action that has impact. And who you vote for is an action that has impact. So nothing that you do in the realm of voting is worthless. Your action always matters. If you don't show up, it makes a difference. If you do show up, it makes a difference. It's just the question of how does it make a difference? And now that leads us to the real heart of the question. Should I vote?
That's the underlying question, right?
Should. Yeah. Should I vote? And this is interesting because there are a couple of things built into it. Number one, there is some sense of like having an obligation, right? Because if there was merely disinterest in voting, there would be no question. You would just act according to that disinterest. But there's kind of like a moral hook that's got you. Like, I ought to do something. I have a duty to society. Would I be ignoring my duty to society? So there's that element that's going on. But then there's also some dissatisfaction with the options. There's something that makes you feel like, am I wasting my time here? And it doesn't sound like it's the sort of thing where you feel like, hey, I just hate standing in line. There seems to be a dissatisfaction with what's being presented to you. And so here's what I would say. If you're at a point in your life where you feel like, I don't even know if my vote makes a difference, I don't know if I should vote, I'm actually kind of thinking about not voting or whatever it may be, I would say give yourself permission to step outside of the binary logic of a society that tells you you contribute to evil if you don't endorse like their two-party system that everyone worships. Everyone complains about the two-party system. Everyone complains about the lack of options. And then every time there's an opportunity to vote one's conscience, people tell the same story every single election period without an exception. They say, this one is special. This is the most important one yet. I've never come across an election period that isn't the most important one yet. And that isn't like really special. Like this, we can't afford this time to vote our conscience. Normally, if things didn't matter, and there's literally never been one of those, if things didn't matter and if there wasn't something really big at stake and we didn't really need to keep this evil villain out of office, then maybe we could vote our conscience by, voting for a third party and trying to contribute percentages to another candidate being able to have a bigger platform. In an ideal world, yeah, fine. But we gotta vote for the lesser of two evils. And this is a game that gets played every single time. Again, show me the election that didn't matter where we could afford to vote our conscience. You got to give yourself permission to not make decisions based on the guilt tripping that other people are doing to you. And you've got to vote your conscience. For me, that's taken the form of not voting at all. Not endorsing a system that I don't believe in, not endorsing a system that I think is artificial, that I think is manipulated, that I think is designed to pacify us by convincing us that we're having an impact when the real impact is elsewhere. For me, that's what voting my conscience has taken the form of. I don't condemn other people who vote their conscience in a different direction. For some people, voting their conscience has meant I'm going to vote for someone that I believe in, even though I know the chances of them winning are low, because I want to do what's right, not do something that I think is wrong or that doesn't reflect my values just because I think it's going to have a more likely to be on the winning side or something like that. So I think the answer here is to get rid of externally imposed shoulds and be driven by your own internal values. Follow your conscience. If that means not voting, if that means voting outside the binary logic of the two-party system, give yourself permission to do it and know that no matter what you do, there will be self-righteous people who condemn you for it and try to make you feel guilty about it. And there's no choice you can make that's going to escape that fact. Just own who you want to be. Own what you actually believe.
Can we talk about one other component of this? I think there is a opportunity cost component. Because if I spend 8 hours researching all of the different candidates, I'm responsible, which is also a societal construct, right? Voting responsibility is a construct, any sort of responsibility. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just simply saying I understand that quite often the things we think we're responsible for are simply mimetic responsibilities. And when I look at the opportunity cost, what else could I do with those 8 hours? Or if I have to wait in line for 2 hours, now it's 10 hours. And so is this the best use of 10 hours for me? Because this is not an infinite resource. And so I'll never get that time back. And if I can answer, yes, I think this is the best use of these 10 hours, not because someone bullied me into voting, but because for me, this is the most compelling thing to do with my 1, 2, 5, 10 hours. Then I can make that decision and feel outstanding about it. But if I decide, you know what, I'd rather spend 10 hours working in a soup kitchen, I'm not wrong for that either. Or by the way, 10 hours watching Ozark. I'm not wrong for that either.
Right.
The 10 hours of watching Ozark might have a higher probability of taking you somewhere that you don't want to be based on your own principles and preferences. But that's a question again of, is it healthy or not healthy? Does it work or does it not work based on my own values? But one thing I would encourage people, if I can just go ahead and push my agenda explicitly for a quick minute, because this is my agenda. This is what my life is all about. And if I had to reduce the meaning of my existence to a single thing, I'm quite comfortable being oversimplified as a guy that's only about this and nothing else. And that is, find something you feel passionate about that can make a society freer, starting with yourself and the people within your sphere of influence, and dedicate yourself to that with the very same fervor that people have towards politics. Politics is not a substitute for self-actualization. Politics is not a substitute for spirituality. And although it has a role, it becomes a very dangerous preoccupation when we use it as a substitute for those things. My biggest concern, I'm not afraid of who anybody out there votes for. There's nobody that scares me because I think they're going to vote in the wrong direction. What scares me is that over and over again, this conversation about voting and personal power is based on the presupposition that the greatest impact we have on society is this decision that we make every once in a while in the voting booth. What frightens the hell out of me is that my neighbor doesn't take themselves seriously as a creative force. And they buy into the illusion, the self-destructive lie that when they are not at the voting booth, what they're doing doesn't really matter. But what you do in terms of your personal health, your mental health, your creative projects, your family life, your spiritual life, all of those things are things that you can vote for every single day. And if you show up 365 days a year voting for your mental health, voting for your family, voting for your personal wellness, then a lot of these conversations about, hey, we're stuck in a society where we got two complete idiots, neither of which we like, and we're forced to choose, those problems will go away because those problems are really an extension and expression of the fact that internally, we're so screwed up. Internally, we don't have any options. Like, that's an outer reflection of our own inner mess. And if we focus on dealing with that inner mess, a lot of these issues become a little bit more simplified. So that's my agenda. I have no desire to play any role of influence in how anybody out there votes when it comes to politicians. My life is better off the less that I talk about them. But vote for yourself, please. Vote for your potential. Vote for your creative power.
I mean, that's the biggest takeaway that I'm hearing here. It's like, you do you, man. Whose question is this? Daniel's?
Yeah.
Daniel, you do you, buddy. What's going to make you feel good? Like, that's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter. If I sit here, and I do, I will totally be like, Daniel, you should go out and vote. Your vote matters, because of my upbringing. And I've talked about this before in the podcast. Like, I was taught to not vote, to stay politically neutral, because don't worry, Jesus is behind the wheel. Don't worry about it. As an adult, I'm like, oh, wow, I kind of resent that. So, like, I go out on my way to vote. I'll encourage people to vote. But me encouraging people to vote is just like if I was to encourage people not to vote. Just pushing my preference. Drink Mountain Dew.
Isn't it funny that we also see these campaigns of make sure you get out there and vote every 4 years during the presidential cycle? We rarely talk about that with respect to your local mayor or the local sheriff, which probably has way more effect on your life than the president does.
And we definitely don't talk about it when it comes to anything related to personal health. That would be considered imposing your religion and rude. Totally okay to tell people to get out there and vote in the name of moral duty and obligation. Completely rude and insulting and disrespectful of people's freedom to have an opinion about their physical or mental health. Hey, bro, I think you should read more. Hey, man, I'm just saying it out of love, man. I never seen you pick up a book. You watch 8 hours of TV all day. I never see you work out. Out of love, bro. That makes me an evil villain who's so rude, who imposes a religion on people. But I can tell you to go out there and vote, and that's socially acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of those, oh, but that just has to do with me, who I vote affects society. No, absolutely not. Like, your mental and physical health affects everybody in your life, and to a greater degree, because your voting decisions are just an extension of that more fundamental reality. There are aspects of your life that who you vote for don't affect. There are zero aspects of your life that your mental health and physical health don't affect.
Did you enjoy this standalone Patreon highlight? If so, you can listen to full episodes of the Minimalist Private Podcast, available exclusively on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.